All right, crim 15. We are wrapping up with chapter 14, making ethical choices. So a lot of this chapter, well, ultimately has to do with making ethical choices, but we're going to talk a lot about 9/11, really, and how 9/11 changed the way we as a country view a lot of things, and how ethics in law enforcement changed after 9/11, and how our perception of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate changed after 9/11. And I'm going to say most of you, I'm assuming that you were alive as of 9/11/2001. I'm thinking, yeah, most of you, I think you were, gosh, I'm thinking at this point, maybe some of you weren't even born yet. To be 18, oh gosh, yeah, my daughter just turned 18 and she's going to be in college very soon. So some of you probably weren't even born yet. But as an adult, having lived through, I was an adult, I was a parent at the time that 9/11 took place. I can tell you that our country changed so significantly after September 11th of 2001. I can't even begin to explain it. Anyways, so here's the learning objectives as usual. Major themes. Major themes that we talk about: presence of authority, power, force, discretion. We need to have ethical leadership in our country. I think that a lot of people question, depending on what side you're on. It's unfortunate that our country at this point is also so divided. You know, there are a lot of people who supported President Trump and thought that a lot of the things that he did were very ethical. I know some of you are cringing right now. And then there are a lot of people who support President Biden and think a lot of the things that he does are very ethical. And there's another whole group of you right now that are cringing as I say that. So I understand we are a nation very divided right now. And if I could say one thing, a positive thing, and I know it's really hard to even stomach that phrase, a positive thing that came out of 9/11 is that we were one. We were all Americans. We were all on the same side. And I've never seen our country so united as I did after, in the months after 9/11. It was crazy. That part at least was in a good way. We were all Americans. It was a uniting time. We were united in our grief and we were united in our resolve to be one. So I think that changed some things in the way we as Americans thought and or probably still do think. Okay, September 11th traumatized a city and really traumatized our country. A foreign entity came to our land and attacked us Americans and killed quite a few Americans, more than 3,000. That definitely was something that we had not really lived through before. We'd had a war in the United States, but it was a civil war, Revolutionary War. We kind of we had fought against ourselves, but we'd never had someone come here on our land and kill us. So that changed the way we viewed enemies. The war on terror didn't just affect the military, but it also affected federal agencies, even local law enforcement agencies. Really interesting the way that happened. So what is terrorism? A deliberate, negligent, or reckless use of force against non-combatants by state or non-state actors for ideological ends in the absence of a substantively just legal process. So becoming the victims of a terrorist attack, which is what happened in New York City on September 11th, what is appropriate and what is ethical? What kind of ethics do we as Americans, or did we as Americans, need to hold in place when we were investigating something as significant as the attack on the Twin Towers at 9/11? Okay, does this does the magnitude of that attack change anything on how we investigate things? Does that change the legal and ethical guidelines of how we detain and treat prisoners? Right? Okay, this is different, right? Or is it different? Is what I should be saying. Philosophers have debated the whole concept of war. Are there certain times when war is okay? Is war acceptable to uphold the good of the community? When unjust injuries are inflicted or on others, is it okay for us Americans to get back at those who unjustly injured our citizens? Was revenge justified? Making war acceptable? Is war okay, natural law, to protect our country? Or is it just man-made law or a positivist law? So there's different concepts of whether or not war is justified. Some say that the threat must be grave, lasting, and certain. There must be, before someone goes to war, there must be no other means to avert the threat. There must be a good probability of success, and there must be the means must not create a greater evil than the threat responded to. Ethical formalism does not look at the consequences of an action to justify it. So do we have to justify what happens when we go back to Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, any of these, Syria, any of these countries where there might have been insurgents who might have participated in the attack on 9/11, and we drop bombs in their countries? Is it justified? The response to 9/11. Okay, so I remember as a little kid, my dad was a federal marshal. Okay, so he worked for the U.S. Marshal Service. So he used to travel a lot. And as a little kid, I remember going to the Fresno airport because my dad traveled all the time. I would get to walk out on the tarmac with him and walk him onto the plane and hug him goodbye as he would get on the plane to fly off to wherever he was going. Okay, now that was me as a little kid in probably the 1970s and 80s. Okay, you can imagine what a culture shock it was when now you can't even get past a certain area in the airport with a bottle of water, right? I mean, it changed drastically. I mean, you can't get on an airplane without having first taken off your shoes, your belt, your everything. You had to practically strip naked. I'm exaggerating. You don't have to be naked to get on an airplane. I can't tell you how many times I've had to be felt up by a TSA agent just to get on an airplane. Very different than it was before 9/11. The new goals include more national enforcement of laws, and I would say that some of those laws are more strict in other countries than they are still in the United States. Have the local agencies changed the way they do things as well? Sure they have. Everyone has changed the way they do things. If you go to New York now, I went to New York, gosh, we went on the 4th of July, and I think the year was 2017, which was long after 9/11. Literally, police officers with assault rifles on every corner. And I'm not exaggerating. Police officers, assault rifles, every corner, everywhere we went. I'd be willing to bet that before 9/11, that was not the case. So things have changed. There are different forms of the response. Detainments, renditions in secret prisons, Guantanamo Bay, we're going to talk more about this, torture, governmental secrecy, we're going to talk more about all this stuff, wiretapping, undercover operations, detainments. Immediately after 9/11, hundreds of non-citizens were detained on either immigration charges or material witness charges. The Patriot Act was passed by our government, required that all individuals on visas report to immigration offices. Many were detained on minor violations of their visa and held for months in federal facilities and county jails without hearings. This was a significant issue. Names and even the number of detainees were withheld for months. Deportation hearings were closed to the media and the public. This is what happened after 9/11. Is that ethical? It's easy for me to say. It sounds pretty unethical. I didn't lose my loved ones to 9/11. I'm not trying to justify, I'm just saying, trying to think of both sides of this argument. Renditions in secret prisons. Renditions are secret, basically kidnappings of suspects. Yeah, this really does happen. Secret prisons, there were secret kidnappings where people were taken to secret prisons and they were allegedly closed in about 2006. We don't know because it was supposed to be a secret. We've all heard about Guantanamo Bay. GITMO was the short name for it. Guantanamo Bay, it was a facility, Guantanamo Bay housed a facility where we, the United States, held a significant number of what we called enemy combatants. These enemy combatants were held there basically without due process. We suspected that they were terrorists, so we basically ultimately held them there for whatever period of time without due process. We were able to do that because they were not on our land. And as you can see here, there were tons of lawsuits that were filed by the enemy combatants against President Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, you name it. And so the Supreme Court got involved pretty heavily. U.S. citizens could not be held indefinitely. Excuse me. Detainees could challenge their detention in U.S. federal courts. The government may not indefinitely detain even illegal immigrants without some due process, and military commissions were set up as a type of due process. Okay. Congress passed after and the act after Hamdan versus Rumsfeld to invalidate the presidential decree. Widespread criticism. There was widespread criticism that the act ignored the ancient right of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is ultimately part of the court process that says a person who is being detained has the right to have a court hearing so that their accuser, the person who is detaining them, has to show proof that there is a valid reason for them to be detained. So again, we have another ruling against President Bush. The Supreme Court rejected the military commission as a due process substitute for federal courts. So it did not go well for President Bush. But ultimately, over all those years, you'll see 2001 is the year that 9/11 happened. We're looking at 2008, so this is 7 years later. You still got people sitting in custody at Guantanamo Bay. Once President Obama came into office, he ordered that the detainees have a right to habeas corpus. Torture. You know what torture is. Again, thinking about morals and ethics. We're talking about people who killed thousands and thousands of people in our country. Deprived of sleep, light, food, and water. Bound and forced to stand in painful positions. Kept naked and hooded. Threatened with attack dogs. Ethical? Justified? Did it happen? Probably. Was it justified? I'm going to let you make that call. Government secrecy has also been a significant problem. I think in most cases, if the public knew what was going on in the government, I think most of us would be horrified. You'll probably remember the WikiLeaks. What was the guy's name? I think he's holed up in Sweden, Switzerland. There have been lots of allegations of government secrecy. Is it okay for the government to hide the information from us about what is going on with enemy combatants, with torture, with the way people have been treated as a result of 9/11? I don't know the answer to that. Wiretapping. Again, all of this is related to basically the Patriot Act, which is an act that went into place after 9/11 that basically gave the government, law enforcement agencies, more leeway when dealing with terrorist suspects. What are your thoughts? Should our government have had more leeway in dealing with terrorist suspects after we were attacked on our own soil? And again, I am not, I'm not going to give my opinion because this class is not about my opinion. What do you think? Wiretapping? Okay, here's more information about the Patriot Act. I'm going to let you read it because you can read it. Undercover operations. Absolutely. Again, I'm going to let you read that as well. Human rights-based policing recognize that some acts are never justified. I don't really care what the UK does, so I'm not sure why this slide is even in here. The war on terror is the greatest challenge facing this country today. Ultimately, ethics is about facing a dilemma and making a decision. We have had numerous ethical dilemmas, certainly in law enforcement, even in your lifetimes, and you are not that old. Between Vietnam, Abu Ghraib, sometimes in your own daily life, how do you go about making the right decision? How do we teach people to make the right decision? Is it something that can be taught? Or is it something that's just ingrained in you? Is it something you learned from your parents? I don't know. There you go. That's it. Discussion questions.